Hey guys, tonight we slip into the snow-blanketed silence of a Viking village, the air crackling with frost and the distant thud of boots on packed earth. You stand beneath a smoky thatched roof, the firelight dancing in gold and shadow against the longhouse walls. Everything smells like pine resin, sweat, and something suspiciously fishy, probably the stew. Voices murmur in Old Norse, and somewhere outside wolves howl. A drum begins to beat slowly, and that's your cue. You're about to witness one of the most curious events in the Norse calendar, a Viking wedding. Of course, you probably won't survive this. Between the mead, the rituals, and the very real chance someone will mistake you for a rival clan's spy, the odds aren't great. But hey, it's worth it for the story, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle a bit closer to the fire pit, hoping the goat doesn't kick you again. The bride's family occupies one side of the longhouse, the groom's the other. In the centre, a shallow pit smoulders with glowing coals, surrounded by baskets of offerings, antlers, carved runes, dried herbs, and one particularly unsettling effigy of what looks like a troll holding mistletoe. That one winks at you, probably just the shadows. In Viking culture, winter was the most sacred time for binding two souls. Not because it was romantic, more because no one was out raiding, farming, or dying at sea. Everyone was stuck indoors, and they figured might as well throw a party. This wedding's been brewing for months, maybe years. The match was likely arranged at a thing, a community meeting that's part parliament, part food fight. A well-placed alliance could mean more land, better trading partners, or just fewer axes thrown at your face during disputes. Tonight the bride wears red, symbolising fertility, and thick layers of wool and fur. You can barely see her under all that fabric. Her face is smeared with some kind of ash and berry paste, and her eyes are lined with coal. She looks like she's going to war. In a way she is. The groom, on the other hand, is wearing his best tunic, freshly laundered, which in Viking terms means rinsed in cold stream water and smoked over juniper branches. He's also gripping a sword hilt like it might jump out of his hand and run off without him. Here's the fun part. The ceremony starts by reenacting a battle. Not a metaphorical one, an actual skirmish. The groom's friends attack the bride's friends in a staged brawl, full of shouting, wooden shields and choreographed stumbles. Think Norse WWE with more fur. You duck as a wooden spear clatters past your head. No one seems to notice or care. This part is about chaos, about the clash of old identities. It's a final send-off to who they were before the marriage. If someone loses a tooth, that's just extra luck for the couple. Once the dust settles, and someone finally finds the elder who wandered off for a nap, it's time for the oath swapping. They stand at the hearth, the heart of every Viking home. Fire, in their world, was sacred. It connected them to the gods, especially Freya and Freya, deities of love, fertility, and curiously, really good harvests. Each partner recites a vow, not about love, but about loyalty, strength, and surviving winter together. You hear phrases like, "stand with you when the fjords freeze and share my axe and my ale." No promises about taking out the trash or remembering anniversaries. Those hadn't been invented yet. Lucky them. Then comes the gifting. Not rings, though sometimes bronze or iron arm rings made the cut. More often, you'd see a symbolic sword passed from father to groom, representing protection, and keys handed from mother to bride, symbolising the home. Historians still argue whether these items held legal weight or were just for show, but the ceremony was deeply emotional either way. And now, it's time for the feast. That stew you smelled? It's ready. You're handed a wooden bowl filled with some kind of root vegetable porridge, fatty pork, and a generous ladle of sour mead. Someone raises a horn carved with serpents and shouts a blessing to Thor. Everyone else joins in, even the goat. As you eat, a skald, a poet and performer, begins reciting the couple's saga. It's full of highly questionable details, like how the groom supposedly wrestled a sea serpent to earn the bride's affection. You glance at him. He looks like he's never even wrestled a wet blanket. Between courses, guests toss bones into the fire, each whispering a wish or warning for the couple. The bones crackle ominously, and the bride's aunt gasps at the way one splits. It apparently foretells twins. The groom nearly chokes on a meatball. By the time dessert, honey cakes and dried berries, is served, the atmosphere is relaxed, even sleepy. Elders mumble half-forgotten blessings. A few guests fall asleep on hay-stuffed mats. The bride and groom are led, to a private nook behind a thick woolen curtain. This isn't voyeuristic, it's symbolic. The community watches them begin the marriage, not consummate it. Well, ideally, it's a grey area. And you? You find yourself outside, staring up at the night sky. It's bursting with stars, and if you're lucky, a shimmer of green and northern lights unfurls above like a celestial wedding veil. The air bites your lungs. You pull your cloak tighter. In this frozen village, love isn't whispered or written in poems. It's shouted across fires, carved into bone, sealed with mead and witnessed by every eye in the clan. Tomorrow life returns to its hard rhythm. But tonight is for warm fires, long stories, and the peculiar, powerful magic of Viking matrimony. You wake up with straw in your hair, and the distinct taste of fermented something lingering on your tongue. Someone must have tucked a pelt over you during the night. You hope it wasn't the goat. The longhouse is quiet now, save for a few low snores, and the crackle of the hearth's last embers. But outside, voices rise in a new kind of tension. Not the revelry of wedding night celebration, but the sharp-edged chatter of business. Today is bride price day. You step outside and immediately regret it. The snow crunches beneath your feet like breaking bones, and your breath puffs into the air like a tiny dragon. Gathered in the village clearing are two clusters of serious-looking people in thick cloaks. On one side, the bride's family. On the other, the groom's. In between, a rough wooden bench, a ledger of runes carved into a sheep's shoulder blade, and one very uncomfortable goat. You swear it gives you a knowing look. Bride price, or munda, isn't quite what modern ears expect. It's not buying a wife like a loaf of bread. It's more like acknowledging the loss her family will experience when she leaves. She was a valuable member of their household, cooking, weaving, caring for children, keeping wolves out. Vikings were equal opportunity rugged. This isn't a dowry either. The bride might still bring property or livestock to the marriage, but that's separate. Munda is about the groom proving he's serious and solvent. And sometimes it's less about cows and more about social standing. A poor man could technically offer service, weapons, or even storytelling skills, though historians still argue whether anyone ever actually got away with just stories. You inch closer. The groom's father is now unrolling a felt bundle to reveal 3 iron tools, 2 amber brooches, and a small silver arm ring. Not bad, but the bride's uncle looks unimpressed. He scratches his beard, glances at the goat, and starts talking about a cousin who got 5 sheep and a longship prow. Negotiations spiral quickly. Someone throws in a hunting dog. Someone else mentions the groom's second cousin's drinking habits. You hear the word honour roughly every 12 seconds, and somehow the goat is now on your side of the bench. It's a reminder that marriage in Viking society isn't just about 2 people. It's about the fusion of clans. When the groom offers bride price, he's saying, "We value you. We're not just snatching your daughter away with a sword and a smile." And yet sometimes they did just that. See, in less civilized corners, and depending on how attractive the bride was, bride price negotiations could collapse into abduction. But more on that later. Today's about the formal dance of barter. And behind the gruff posturing, there's a kind of poetry. The objects offered aren't random, they tell a story. That amber brooch, pulled from the Baltic coast during a storm. The iron chisel, made from ore smelted by the groom himself. Each item carries history, effort, value. There's also a slight twist. If the couple ever divorces, and it's the groom's fault, say he ran off with a shield maiden or forgot the anniversary of her grandmother's funeral feast, the bride price often must be returned, sometimes doubled. Now that's incentive to behave. Eventually a figure wrapped in a bear pelt stands between the 2 groups, the law speaker. Think of him as a walking legal database with dramatic flair. He recites the terms, sometimes from memory, sometimes from rune stones or carved staves. The bride price is officially accepted. A final token, often a simple coin or a charm, is passed from father to daughter. She clutches it briefly, then hides it in her belt. That's her insurance, literally. Everyone exhales, the goat pees. With that done, they move on to what you might call upgrades. The bride's brothers casually mention she's an expert in brewing sweet mead. The groom's aunt brings up his talent for fixing roofs without falling off. These aren't modest brags, they're essential negotiations. Marriages can include conditional terms. She gets to keep her weaving loom. He agrees not to move the household inland without her say-so. These terms are sometimes carved into oaths, buried under the threshold of their home to bind the deal spiritually. You blink. This isn't just a wedding, it's a merger. Part romance, part business deal, part legal agreement, all soaked in mead and myth. After all, the Vikings believed marriages echoed divine unions. Odin and Frigg, Njord and Skadi, relationships that combined power with friction. Skadi, the goddess of winter, hated Njord's seaside home, so she got every other week in the mountains. Some scholars point to that as proof that even Norse gods had visitation clauses, and yet, for all this structure, flexibility existed too. If a bride wanted to refuse the match, she often could, though not always safely. Records exist of women defying arrangements and choosing their own partners. There are even tales of shield maidens demanding their own bride prices. That's Viking feminism, blood and paperwork. You follow the crowd back toward the longhouse. Deals made, goods exchanged, pride mostly intact. One elder grumbles that bride prices used to involve actual treasure, not these pathetic bronze beads. Another tells him to hush and eat his dried herring. As night falls, gifts are redistributed, not just to the couple, but to relatives, matchmakers, and even guests who help the ceremony succeed. So maybe you get that brooch after all, unless the goat eats it. You end the evening by the fire again, but the tone has shifted. There's a new stillness. The young couple has been woven into the fabric of their people through firelight, food, and finely judged bartering. You stretch out your legs, warm your hands on a cup of tart birch mead, and consider just how complex love can be when it's packed into an iron ring, a sled dog, and one very satisfied goat. You're awakened before dawn by shouting, gruff voices, splintering wood, and the unmistakable clang of metal on metal. Either the wedding guests are still hungover and brawling, or something far more ritualistic is going on. You peek out from under your fur blanket and see a crowd already forming near the village sparring ground. Two men stand at opposite ends of a frozen patch of earth, shirtless despite the cold, swords drawn and eyes locked. There's tension in the air. You can almost taste the adrenaline, or maybe that's just dried blood from yesterday's roasted seal. This, dear guest, is not a grudge match. It's part of the wedding. In some Viking communities, especially those with more rural or combative traditions, marriage wasn't sealed with just vows and mead, it was forged in combat. This isn't just testosterone-fueled drama, although, let's be honest, that's a big part of it. These duels were symbolic. They were a trial by axe, a ritualized performance to prove a suitor's strength, honour, and capacity to defend his household. You thought picking up your in-laws at the airport was stressful? Try single combat with your bride watching. The groom today has agreed to face one of the bride's kin, sometimes a brother, sometimes a cousin, sometimes even a father, if he's still spry and suspicious. It's not meant to be deadly, but the rules are flexible, and accidents, well, they make for excellent saga material. Historians still argue whether these combats were always voluntary, or if some villages used them to conveniently screen out unworthy matches. There's a cheer as the blades clash, sparks fly. The groom slips, then recovers with a surprisingly graceful roll. You hear an elder mutter, "Not bad for a boy raised inland." You shuffle forward for a better view and narrowly avoid getting elbowed by a blacksmith who smells like onions and old regret. The duel isn't just for show, it's a public demonstration of readiness. After all, Viking life was harsh. You didn't just marry for love, you married for survival. A husband who couldn't swing a blade or dodge an axe wasn't just a bad protector, he was a liability. Imagine wintering with someone who can't even kill a reindeer cleanly. Romantic, number practical, extremely. But it's not all about brute force. These events could also be strategic. Some suitors would hire a champion to fight on their behalf. Yes, wedding proxies by sword. If that sounds ridiculous, you're not alone. One 10th century poem mocks a man for sending his cousin to duel while he tended sheep and combed his beard. Harsh words in a society where hair braiding and blade wielding often went hand in hand. The fight ends in a draw, possibly by design. No one really wants blood on the bride's big week. Both men bow, the crowd cheers, you notice the bride watching from a distance, arms crossed, one eyebrow raised. She looks impressed, but only mildly. She probably expected better footwork. After the duel comes the weapon blessing. A local seeress or vulva appears, draped in furs and jangling with bone charms. Her voice is low and hypnotic as she traces symbols in the air and murmurs spells. The groom kneels. His sword is passed through incense smoke, doused briefly in icy water, and then laid across his lap like a sleeping child. He now holds a weapon not just sharpened by iron, but by ritual. This blade is no longer just for battle, it's for protection, ceremony, even the eventual passing to children. In some places, swords were named during this rite. Names like Flametongue or Oathbinder, kind of like Viking Build-A-Bear, but much more stabby. One fringe theory even suggests the sword served as a stand-in for the bride on the first night, placed between the couple in bed as a kind of bridal chastity spell. Whether that's fact or folktale is still debated. You try not to imagine accidentally rolling over onto a broadsword in your sleep. Definitely not the honeymoon vibe you'd want. With the duel concluded and the sword blessed, the mood lightens. There's a round of toasts, another skaldic performance, this one featuring a limerick about the groom's duck-like fighting stance, and then, of course, more mead. Always mead. You overhear some gossip. In one village further north, the trial by combat involves wrestling on a frozen lake, barefoot. In another, potential grooms have to fight while blindfolded, relying only on sound. Yet another tale claims a bride once demanded her suitor defeat 3 challengers, then wrestle her as a final test. She won. There's even talk of a region where women took up blades to challenge their intended husbands. Not just shield maidens either, ordinary village women, proving they weren't just marrying a warrior but becoming one. That version of the ritual didn't last long for reasons you can probably guess, but the stories still echo in old songs, and just when you think it's all over, a horn sounds from the edge of the village. A group of young men approaches, rowdy and smiling, carrying bundles of firewood and something that looks suspiciously like a wheel of cheese. You're witnessing an ancient Viking tradition, the mock raid. This informal event caps off the ritual combat with a bit of theatricality. The groom's friends storm the bride's house, demanding she be surrendered. She pretends to resist, throwing insults, or sometimes actual objects, until they convince her to come out. It's all in fun, a way of saying goodbye to girlhood, hello to married life, and good luck ever sleeping in again. You step back, watching the villagers laugh and jostle, the snow sparkling underfoot like crushed stars. It's hard to tell where the rituals end and the games begin, but maybe that's the point. In Viking society, love was war, and war was life, and weddings were both a contract and a contest, complete with bruises, blade nicks, and the occasional poetic burn. Tonight, the couple is one step closer to their union, not because they kissed or danced under the aurora, but because he proved, publicly, painfully, that he could take a hit and still stand tall. It may not be your idea of romance, but in this world, it's exactly what's needed. You wake up to the rhythmic thump of something soft hitting wood. When you crack open one crusty eyelid, you realise it's bread dough, being punched, vigorously, and not by a Viking mother, but by the bride herself, hair tied up in a woven scarf, arms dusted with flour. Welcome to the next strange chapter in your stay here, the bridal apprenticeship. This part of the marriage process doesn't make it into most modern retellings. Too domestic, maybe. But here, in this winter-bound village, it's essential. Once the bride price is agreed upon and the ceremonial combat settled, the bride doesn't just pack her things and ride off into the fjord sunset. Nope. She begins a temporary apprenticeship with her future in-laws. You follow her as she moves from task to task under the sharp-eyed supervision of the groom's mother. It's part job interview, part initiation, part hazing, if we're honest. Today it's bread. Tomorrow, weaving, managing livestock, and, if she's really lucky, learning which neighbours are most likely to borrow things they never return. This transitional period, sometimes lasting a few days, sometimes weeks, is called heimfur. It roughly translates to home-bringing, but that sounds far too cosy. What it really is? A crash course in becoming the fru, the lady of a new household. She's watched constantly, though subtly, how she stirs the stew, how she greets the thralls, even how she handles being corrected for folding cloaks the inland way. Scandalous. In this society, women hold tremendous responsibility. Viking women weren't just background characters, they managed farms, commanded wealth, and even wielded power in spiritual matters. But to earn that role in a new home, a bride must prove she can step into it. Historians still argue whether this period was always consensual, or if, in some villages, it became a test she couldn't truly refuse. Today you see her deftly wrangle a stubborn sheep into its pen. The groom's youngest brother gawks in admiration. A neighbour leans in and mutters, "She'll do just fine. Look at that grip." You learn that she'll sleep separately until the Heimfur ends. Not in the main longhouse, but in a small outbuilding with the other unmarried women, or even in a corner of the family hall partitioned with hanging cloths. It's about modesty, yes, but also symbolic transition. She's between worlds, no longer her father's daughter, not yet her husband's wife. A liminal creature in homespun wool. Later, she's tasked with preparing a medicinal salve from pine resin, lard, and a few pungent herbs you don't recognise. The mixture simmers over a small fire as the old house seer leans in to inspect. With a sniff and a nod, she declares it's suitable for battle wounds and goat hoof rot. Dual-purpose cures, always a win. It's not all drudgery, though. There are moments of laughter, too. You hear her teasing one of the younger girls about her crush on the blacksmith's apprentice. At supper, she tells a surprisingly racy tale about a love potion gone wrong. The matron snorts into her ale, muttering something about the bravery of southern girls. Then comes the moment that makes your jaw go slack. She's invited, finally, to the family loom. This is no IKEA job. The warp-weighted loom is massive, stretching nearly to the rafters, its threads glittering with tiny flecks of crushed shell. She begins to weave, and the room quiets. Weaving isn't just a chore here, it's magic, literal sometimes. Patterns mean protection, fertility, prosperity. The loom is the domain of Frigg, Odin's wife, who's believed to weave the very fates of mortals. The pattern she chooses is subtle but clever, interlocking knots with a hidden rune of Gifu, the gift. It's a blessing, but also a message. I bring value. I am no burden. If anyone noticed, they say nothing. But you do catch the faintest smile on the old woman's face. By nightfall, she's exhausted. You are too, and you've done absolutely nothing. But before rest comes the test of keys. The groom's mother walks over and with solemn ceremony hands her a ring of bronze keys. These are not symbolic. They open the grain stores, the chest of silver, the herb press, and, most importantly, the lockbox where the family's runic contracts are kept. You can practically hear the weight of them jangling with ancient power. Receiving the keys signals that she is trusted, accepted, and officially in charge of the household's inner workings. It's both a promotion and a warning. With these keys come accountability. Should things go wrong, she won't be seen as just the wife. She's the keeper, the hearth warden, the iron spine behind the wooden walls. The groom's mother steps back. The bride bows. Then she quietly hooks the keys onto her belt. She does not smile. One fringe theory claims that in some regions, brides refused the keys if they didn't respect their future families, or if they planned to elope soon after. Taking the keys became both a literal and emotional choice. Of course, the sagas are vague. You suspect that particular tradition may have ended with someone getting locked in a grain bin. You lie in your bedding that night wondering what this all means. In a world so steeped in warfare and glory tales, it's the domestic rituals that seem to hold the most unspoken power. A duel might win her hand, but it's the bread, the weaving, and the iron keys that decide her future. And tomorrow she leaves this trial behind and steps fully into her new life. Name changed, alliances shifted, dowry traded, and pride carefully measured by how well she skins a fish or comforts a fevered toddler. Marriage, Viking style, isn't just about passion, it's about performance. You roll over and pull the pelt tighter, still listening to the low murmurs of women's voices in the loom room. The fire crackles, the wind sighs, and the whole house feels like it's holding its breath for what's to come. The air smells of pine smoke, damp wool, and something vaguely metallic. Blood, probably. You blink into the morning light, your breath misting as you step outside, and find yourself in the middle of another carefully choreographed chaos. The dowry exchange. Now you may be thinking, dowries? That sounds transactional, and you're not wrong. But in Viking society, this wasn't just a tradition. It was an intricate, high-stakes negotiation that could make or break a marriage before the vows were even muttered. You stand to one side of the gathering circle, trying not to sneeze on a bearded elder's cloak, as both families face each other like diplomatic envoys preparing for a treaty. Because in many ways, that's exactly what this is. The dowry, called heimanfylgja, comes from the bride's family. It includes livestock, silver, tools, even slaves if the family is wealthy enough or morally flexible. But more than wealth, it's about legacy. The items are meant to ensure the bride can start a new household with independence and status. You notice one of the bride's brothers dragging forward a stubborn goat tied with a red ribbon. The goat presumably did not agree to any of this. Facing them, the groom's family prepares their counterpart to the dowry, the mundum. It's a bride price, yes, but also a public statement. We value this woman. Here is our pledge. It can include money, land promises, weapons, or rare goods like amber beads or whale ivory. One rumour circulating among the onlookers is that the groom's uncle is offering a drinking horn carved from an aurochs skull. You don't even know what an aurochs is, but it sounds terrifying and extinct. Perfect for a wedding gift. The items are displayed for all to see, lined up on fur-draped benches like sacred offerings. Silver arm rings gleam beside hand-spun cloaks dyed with imported woad. There's even a delicate set of glass beads, a luxury imported from as far as the Black Sea. You overhear one matron whisper, "She's marrying up." That's high praise here. Then come the recitations. Each item is named aloud. Its purpose, its value, its origin. One silver scale, tested for fairness. One brooch, sea-wrought. 2 she-goats of sound milk. This isn't just pageantry, it's documentation. In an oral culture, naming things is the closest thing to a contract. You notice an elderly skald scribbling something on a wax tablet. Not quite a prenup, but close. Historians still argue whether the bride herself had a say in any of this. In some regions, yes, especially among wealthier clans where women wielded more clout. In others, the trade was strictly patriarchal. But one thing is clear. A well-negotiated dowry wasn't just about stuff. It was security. A fallback if the marriage soured, or worse, if the groom died on some ill-fated fjord surfing expedition. There's a brief hiccup when the groom's side tries to swap a promised chest of linen for a single wool tunic. A tense silence follows, broken only by the goat farting audibly. The bride's mother narrows her eyes. 2 seconds later, the original chest reappears, along with a quiet apology and an extra jar of honey. Crisis averted. Once both sides nod, the bride is led forward and shown her new belongings. She touches each item briefly, head bowed, not out of submission, but reverence. These are not just objects. They're the first tools of her new life. With these she will clothe, feed, defend, and expand her family. She pauses at the beads, then slips them into a pouch at her waist. No one says anything, but several aunts exchange knowing glances. Then comes the binding. Not metaphorical, literal. A silken cord, dyed blue, the colour of constancy, is brought out and gently wrapped around the bride and groom's wrists. It's not tight. More of a symbolic tether, a sign that, as their families exchange goods, the couple is also being tied in front of witnesses. You watch as the village priest, half shaman, half notary public, chants something in Old Norse that sounds suspiciously like a recipe, but is probably a blessing. This is the handafesta, or hand fast. You've probably heard versions of this in Celtic tradition, but the Vikings had their own flavour. The couple must remain linked until the sun touches a marked stone at the edge of the village. Hours of public togetherness. A dry run for married life, minus the in-laws knocking on the door every 15 minutes. As the crowd disperses to prepare for the next ceremony, you stay a moment longer, taking in the odd poetry of it all. A culture so often reduced to axes and raids, but here it is, meticulous, legalistic, sentimental in its own chilly way. You recall one fringe account from a 12th century chronicler who described a village where dowries were symbolically fought for, with relatives duelling over specific cows or knives purely for sport. Whether true or not, the idea fits the Viking temperament. Even commerce is better with a bit of bloodshed. Still, it's not all about wealth. You hear whispers of a past bride who brought no silver, only a carved runestone with her mother's blessings etched into it. She was accepted anyway, and later, her husband claimed the stone protected their house from a lightning strike. You make a note to avoid standing near that particular family's roof. As the groom and bride walk off still wristbound, villagers begin disassembling the dowry display. The goat, now fully over its stage fright, tries to eat someone's boot. A small child chases after it, laughing. The air feels lighter, like a page has turned. A deal has been struck. A life has been launched. And you? You're still trying to process that someone once paid for their spouse using 3 buckets of pickled herring and a curse-resistant cauldron. You return to your borrowed blanket and sit on the edge of the bench, watching the light shift across the fjord. There's a strange beauty to it all, this mix of love, economy, tradition, and soft diplomacy. In Viking villages, a wedding wasn't just an emotional union, it was an economic alliance, a political pivot, and, if you're lucky, the start of something genuinely warm in a world mostly made of ice and iron. The sun hasn't quite disappeared behind the snow-dusted ridges when the shouting begins. Not angry shouting, more like rowdy cheering, mixed with the jangle of metal and the sharp bark of laughter. You follow the noise past the smokehouse and down toward the gathering green, where men are stripping off their outer tunics and hefting blunt-edged practice swords. It's time for the groom's boast and trial, a theatrical mix of macho chest-thumping and genuine skill demonstration that's half right, half entertainment. And yes, your new groom friend is front and centre, his shirt already off, revealing a chest that looks like it could deflect arrows on principle alone. This part of the wedding process is less ceremonial, more performative. The Vikings loved a good spectacle, especially one that showed off the physical prowess and personal honour of their kin. And nowhere does this shine brighter than in the bragaful, the boasting cup. A massive horn rimmed in silver and etched with knotwork is passed from hand to hand. Each man drinks deeply, then declares a boast aloud. Not modest, not humble. A true Viking boast must flirt with arrogance and wrestle it into submission. You watch the groom throw his head back and yell, "I once wrestled a bear, drunk, with one arm tied." The crowd roars with delight. Whether or not it's true seems almost irrelevant. The point is the confidence, the bravado. Some boasts are legendary. One man claims he'll build a ship so fast it'll outrun Thor's own chariot. Another swears he can charm any seeress in the region, with a single look and a bowl of salted herring. And then there's the slightly tipsy cousin who claims he invented snow. No one corrects him. After the boast come the trials. Unlike the ceremony earlier, measured, symbolic, this is loud, competitive, and hilariously chaotic. The groom must demonstrate his fitness to defend his new home, prove his strength, agility, and cunning. Think Viking American ninja warrior, minus the water pools and plus a lot more mud. First, he's handed a round shield and told to catch a thrown apple on its edge. Not as easy as it sounds, especially when the apple is overripe and launched with suspicious force. He nails it on the 3rd try to more applause. Next, a wrestling match, barefoot, shirtless, on frozen turf. The opponent? His future brother-in-law, a red-haired slab of muscle with exactly 0 chill. The 2 circle, posture, lunge. You wince at the thud when the groom hits the ground, but he rolls, flips, and somehow lands on top. The crowd erupts. Pride is salvaged. Historians still argue whether these displays were universally practiced or more of a regional quirk. Some coastal villages leaned heavily into theatrical weddings, while more rural enclaves preferred sombre oaths and quiet feasts. But in this place, boasting and brawling are non-negotiable. One fringe source even describes a village where grooms had to swim across an icy fjord, retrieve a ceremonial stone from the bottom, and recite a stanza of poetry before surfacing. That tradition was retired, you're told, after 3 near drownings and 1 incident involving a misquoted line about Thor's thighs. Here, it's less dangerous, but not by much. The final challenge involves an axe-throwing contest. Targets are set against a tree stump, a circle for skill, a painted wolf head for ferocity, and, oddly, a wooden fish wearing a crown. For luck, someone explains, as if that helps. The groom hits the wolf clean in the snout, then splits the fish right down the middle. The tree stump is spared, but only barely. Through all of this, the bride watches from a raised bench, her expression unreadable. She's not just a passive spectator. According to custom, she may interject, if she feels the trials are too easy, or the boasting too hollow. Today, she says nothing. But when her groom slips in the mud and gets a faceful of dirt mid-duel, she chuckles. loudly. The crowd laughs with her. There's strategy here too. This is her final chance to see him not as a suitor, not as a negotiator, but as a living, sweating, occasionally ridiculous man. And his final chance to show he's more than silver rings and loud promises. They don't lock eyes often, but when they do, it's charged with something unspoken. After the trials, there's a ceremonial washing. He's doused in warm water infused with pine and ash bark, meant to cleanse the old life before he enters the new. You suspect it's also a subtle way of saying, "You stink." Then comes the gifting. From the groom to the bride, a knife. Small, delicate, curved. The hilt is carved from bone, the blade surprisingly sharp. He presents it to her silently. She takes it, slides it into her belt. No vows are spoken. The knife is the vow. You learn that this gifting, called melkknife in some dialects, is meant to symbolize provision and defense. It's practical, yes, but layered. I will provide meat for this blade. I will trust you with something that can wound me. I know you're strong enough to need this. Some accounts suggest women once gifted blades in return too, hidden inside bread loaves or sewn into cloak hems. Secret blades for secret strengths. Though scholars debate the accuracy, the metaphor persists. Even love, in Viking lands, comes with a pointy edge. As the sky darkens and the flames of the feast fires rise, the trials wind down. Your breath curls into the twilight as the groom, bruised but beaming, takes a horn of ale and pours a splash into the earth. A toast to his ancestors, to his bride, and to the weirdly aggressive goat he nearly tripped over during the foot race. The crowd cheers. A new saga begins. And you're left marvelling at a people who turn weddings into war games, promises into poetry, and humble knives into symbols of the deepest trust. You follow the others back toward the longhouse, the ground still echoing with laughter and stomped boots. The feast is near, but first, rest. Sort of. Because in this village, even sleep feels like a waiting room before the next ritual kicks in. You wake to the sound of something sizzling, fat maybe, or the crackle of firewood catching in the longhouse hearth. But then you hear singing, high, soft voices drifting through the wooden beams. It's not celebratory, it's haunting, almost eerie. That's when you remember, today is the seeress's blessing, and you're about to witness something that blurs the line between ritual, performance, and raw spiritual theatre. You make your way to the clearing behind the main hall, where a circle of flat stones forms a kind of open-air sanctuary. At the centre stands a tall woman draped in layers of dark wool, bones strung like jewellery along her sleeves. Her eyes are rimmed with soot, her mouth painted red. This is the Völva, a seeress, sorceress and spiritual authority all in one. And she is not someone you want to cross before breakfast. In Viking culture, the Völva holds an uncanny power. Part oracle, part healer, part judge. She doesn't lead the village, but she guides it. Think of her as a cross between a priest and a walking omen. And today, her role is to bless the union and interpret its fate. She begins by anointing the bride with a paste made from ash, honey, and crushed sage. It smells sharp and earthy. She touches the mixture to the bride's forehead, then draws a circle on her chest, over the heart naturally. The crowd watches in respectful silence. Even the children are hushed. You get the sense that interrupting would be the social equivalent of calling someone's grandmother a troll. The groom's turn is a bit rougher. He's asked to kneel while the Völva ties a red cord around his neck. Not tight, but symbolic. This cord represents the web of fate known as word. She mutters something in Old Norse, then cuts the cord in one swift motion. A clean break, meant to sever the groom from any past life, sins, or obligations. You flinch. He doesn't. Historians still argue whether the Völva's role in weddings was widespread, or limited to more mystic-heavy regions like Iceland or certain Swedish valleys. Some say her involvement was reserved for high-status unions only. Others point to scattered graves with ritual tools, wands, staffs, bones, that suggest she was a regular part of community events, not just a spooky myth. Today, she's fully in command. She walks in a circle around the couple 3 times, chanting low and rhythmic. Her staff, a curved length of driftwood inlaid with bronze nails, taps the ground at each step. The third pass is different. She stops in front of them and holds out a bundle of feathers and bones wrapped in sinew and wolfskin. This is the Hjartablot, or heart offering. It's not literal, thank Odin, no animal sacrifice today. But symbolically, she asks the couple to name something they're willing to surrender to make the marriage thrive. It could be fear, pride, a secret. They whisper into the bundle. You'll never know what they say, and that's the point. The Völva nods, wraps the bundle tighter, and tosses it into the fire. One lesser-known tidbit. In some villages, the seeress would throw in bones from a recently hunted animal, usually one killed by the groom, to seal the offering. The idea being that his survival energy would now feed the union. You're told this particular groom brought down a lynx last winter. You glance at his boots and, yep, lynx fur. That'll do it. Then comes the rune casting. On a cloth of black linen, the vulva scatters a handful of carved bone tiles. The runes land in messy spirals and jagged lines. She leans close, studying the pattern like a detective at a crime scene. Her face is unreadable. Everyone leans in, and you feel the collective inhale of 50 people holding their breath. Finally, she speaks. Her voice is calm, measured. The union will be tested by snow and silence, but joy comes after. A few villagers murmur affirmations. The bride doesn't flinch. The groom blinks twice. You, of course, are thinking snow and silence. What is this, a poetic death sentence? But here omens aren't meant to be clear. They're scaffolds. Each couple builds their own meaning into them. And if you're wondering whether the seeress sometimes fakes it, well, that's one of the scholarly debates too. Some researchers believe the vulva used cold reading, subtle psychological cues, or just good old-fashioned theatre to deliver accurate readings. Others argue she was genuinely believed to channel the Norns, the mythic weavers of fate. You decide not to ask her yourself. The ritual ends with a shared sip from the elixir of unity. It's a warm concoction brewed from fermented berries, mead, and crushed mint leaves, served in a shared horn. The couple drinks, then pass the horn around the circle. It tastes surprisingly good, if a bit herby. You overhear someone joke, "Last year it had mushrooms. People saw elves." You watch as the bride and groom walk side by side back toward the hall. No music, no clapping, just quiet footsteps on mossy ground. This blessing isn't about pageantry. It's about gravity. A subtle reminder that marriage, in this world, isn't just emotional or legal, it's cosmic. Later, around the hearth, you hear stories of past blessings gone sideways. One vulva predicted a wedding that would end in shipwreck. The couple ignored her. 3 months later, the groom's longship vanished in a storm. Coincidence? Maybe. But no one here thinks so. Another story tells of a blessing so joyful, the crops doubled that year. People still rub that seeress's burial mound for luck. You lie back against a woven mat, heart still beating a little faster than it should. The crackling fire, the feathered shadow of the vulva's cloak, the bitter tang of herbs, all of it lingers in your mind. The Vikings might be remembered for war, but when they married, they didn't just invite friends and family. They invited fate. They stood in the middle of that web of word and said, yes, together, even if snow and silence are coming. The next morning, the frost crunches louder than usual beneath your boots, and you wonder briefly if it's symbolic or just really cold. Today is the shared cloak rite, and while it may sound cozy, it's layered with more emotional weight than a saga hero's guilt complex. You find the couple standing at the edge of the village, not in finery or furs this time, but in plain linen. No jewellery, no braids, no painted brows. The simplicity is intentional. It's a stripping down, a return to the bare bones of who they are before taking on the shared identity of a married pair. Between them hangs a cloak, massive, woolen, and embroidered with intertwined animals, snakes, wolves, birds, looping endlessly into each other. You learn this is a Felafelder, the hidden cloak, a name both literal and symbolic. Woven by the bride's family, it includes coloured threads dyed from plants grown in the village, and even strands of her childhood flax spun into the lining. It is, essentially, a wearable family tree. But today it gets a roommate. The groom steps forward first. He lays his hand on the cloak's clasp, fashioned from an iron brooch shaped like a pair of interlocked axes. Then he steps inside, wrapping the cloak around himself. It dwarfs him slightly, on purpose. The point is that the cloak was never meant for one. It's only complete when both are inside. He opens one side, the bride joins him, and just like that they vanish inside the same skin. Not figuratively, literally. The cloak is fastened around them, covering their shoulders and down to their knees, hiding their hands and half their faces. The village is silent. No one claps, no one cheers. You realise you're holding your breath again. The symbolism? Stark. From this moment on, they are two within one. The same wind, same burden, same warmth. This rite is one of the more universally documented elements of Viking marriage. Mainstream sources agree it existed in various forms across Norway, Sweden and Iceland. What they debate is whether the shared cloak was worn for a full day or just for the ceremony. Some say it had to remain on through the night, even while sleeping. Others claim it was purely metaphorical, not physical. But here, you're watching it happen, and it's moving. There's a quiet procession to the hearthstone, a large slab embedded in the village centre, streaked black from years of fires. An elder kneels and lights a small bundle of hay and dried herbs beneath it. The flame licks upward, faint but stubborn. The couple kneels behind the stone, still cloaked, and together they recite what sounds like a verse. You can't catch every word, but you recognise phrases. Storm and sun, one breath, earth under oath. It's part prayer, part promise. Not unlike modern vows. If modern vows included swearing to share winter firewood and not insult each other's spear technique. Then comes a detail you weren't expecting. The couple must remain cloaked until they can complete one specific task, lighting a new flame together. They're handed a flint and steel. Sounds easy? Try it with one hand each. That's right. Under the cloak, they each use one arm to strike the flint while holding dried grass between them. You hear frustrated whispers, sparks, a hiss, more sparks. At one point, there's a little yelp. Did someone get pinched? Probably. Finally, smoke. Then fire. A small flame, but it counts. The village exhales. The elder steps forward and nods solemnly. The couple stands, unclasping the cloak and revealing flushed cheeks and wild hair. The crowd still doesn't cheer. It's not that kind of moment. But there's a collective warmth that spreads, like honey in warm mead. Even the livestock seems quieter. Quirky sidebar. In some villages, the shared cloak had secret pockets sewn inside, each containing a riddle. The couple would reach in during the rite and pull one out, reading it aloud and answering together. If they answered in sync or with humour, it was considered a good omen. One such riddle from a preserved scrap goes, "What bites with no teeth, roars with no mouth, and splits stone in its sleep?" Answer, frost. Romantic, right? In this village there are no riddles, but the couple is gifted a carved wooden box to keep the cloak in. It's sealed with 2 keys, each worn on a necklace. If they ever wish to part, and yes, even Vikings acknowledge the possibility, the keys must be used together to unlock it, and the cloak returned to the hearthfire. That's their version of divorce court. No lawyers, just smouldering wool and probably a lot of awkward eye contact. Historians still argue whether the cloak-burning tradition was widely practiced, or more of a dramatic retelling by 19th century folklorists with a flair for tragic endings. The practical reality? Wool was expensive. Most would have just tucked it away and avoided eye contact forever, but the symbolism clearly stuck. After the rite, the couple is given a bowl of porridge sweetened with dried berries and honey, traditionally eaten from the same spoon. The bride feeds the first bite to the groom. He feeds the second to her. It's tender, if a little sticky. You make a mental note. Maybe don't wear your good tunic next time. Then, a surprise twist. The village kids, who've been watching from the sidelines with suspicious innocence, suddenly run forward and throw handfuls of dried flower petals, feathers, and wait. Is that goat fur? Yes, it is. It's a chaotic, joyful moment, and it turns out it's intentional. The storm of soft things, they call it. It's a local tradition meant to test the couple's ability to laugh together while under attack. Mission accomplished. The groom pulls a feather out of his ear. The bride sneezes. Everyone laughs. By now, the sun has climbed past the treetops, the frost on the roofs has melted, and the couple walks together toward their home, not alone, not separate, but wrapped in something stronger than fabric. Shared purpose, shared promises, and very probably shared goat fur stuck to everything. You follow behind, your breath warm in the still morning air. There's more to come, of course, but for now, the cloak has done its job. 2 stories, woven together. 2 lives, stitched at the seams. By now you're getting used to the oddity of Viking romance. It's part danger, part poetry, part spilled mead. But nothing quite prepares you for what happens next. The axe exchange ceremony. That's right. You thought wedding gifts were awkward in modern times? Try watching a new couple swap bladed weapons while an audience of elders silently judges their technique. The morning begins with the village blacksmiths laying out tools on a ceremonial rack near the longhouse. Not household items, not farming gear, axes, gleaming, sharpened, engraved. Each one is different. One has a boar etched into the blade, another is inlaid with bronze that catches the sun like fire. These aren't battle axes per se, but they could easily double as one in a pinch, which, historically speaking, happened more often than anyone would like. You learn quickly that this exchange isn't just symbolic, it's deeply rooted in Norse legal custom. In some Viking regions, a weapon wasn't just a tool, it was an extension of one's rights and identity. By giving your spouse a blade, you weren't just saying, "I trust you." You were saying, "You now hold part of my agency in your hands." No pressure, right? The bride goes first. She steps forward, selects an axe from the rack, and turns it in her palms like she's weighing the future. Then she holds it out to the groom. Handle first. Always handle first. That's crucial. Offering the blade in first would imply hostility or worse, arrogance. He accepts it with both hands, nods once, and, here's the fun part, tests the blade by splitting a piece of seasoned oak laid out beside him. A clean cut means the gift is strong, the omen favourable. If it splinters or bounces, well, no one says it out loud, but a few eyebrows will raise. He nails the cut, clean as a whistle. The crowd exhales like they've just watched a tightrope act. A woman whispers, "Good steel." She chose well. Then it's his turn. He steps to the rack and chooses a slightly smaller axe, not less sharp, just more elegant. The handle is carved with swirls resembling storm clouds, a nod to the bride's family crest. He presents it to her the same way, and she receives it with equal solemnity. But instead of splitting wood, she uses hers to slice through a thick braid of woven straw suspended from a pole. Straw symbolises fertility and domestic skill. Cutting it in one try means she'll bring strength and balance to the household. She cuts clean. The straw drops with a whisper. Cue the applause. Well, soft clapping. Vikings aren't big on noisy praise. You hear a few muttered blessings, and someone behind you mutters, "No one lost a toe this time." A local joke, you assume, probably based on a very real incident. This custom has roots that run deep. Mainstream historians agree that weapon gifting was a huge part of Norse courtship and marriage, especially in Iceland and rural Norway. A man might offer his future wife a small blade as an informal betrothal sign. Some sagas even mention women forging or modifying weapons for their husbands, adding intricate wrappings or runes for protection. But scholars still debate whether the ceremony we're watching, a full public exchange with symbolic tests, was the norm across all Viking communities or a localized tradition. Some believe it evolved later, once Viking culture started blending with Christian influences and looked for ways to ritualize the balance of power in a marriage. Others argue it goes back to much older pagan rites tied to divine unions between gods and goddesses. What's undisputed? It's absolutely memorable. After the exchange, the couple walks together to a carved pole in the village square known as the Heimer Staff, or home post. Each lays their new axe against the pole, blade up, handle touching the wood. They rest there for the day, like sentinels watching over the final celebrations. One quirky local twist. The axes are guarded by chickens. Yes, chickens. Apparently it's tradition here to release a pair of hens near the weapons. If the birds roost near one axe more than the other, it's seen as an omen, favour toward that spouse. Today the hens nestle up near the bride's axe. Someone claps. The groom shrugs dramatically, feigning defeat. Another tradition kicks in as the sun crests the hill, the axe blessing toast. A circle forms around the couple and each elder takes a turn lifting a horn of mead and offering a one-line blessing, each themed to axes and union. You hear things like, "May your edges stay sharp, but never against each other. May your home fall to no hand but your own. May you cleave wood, not hearts." It's witty, it's a little intense, and it's oddly touching. Even the village grump, Old Man Frode, who's been silent all week, raises his horn and mutters, "Don't waste good iron on bad love," high praise by his standards. And now comes the part where the crowd truly loosens up. The axe dance. Yes, you heard that right. With the formal part done, the younger villagers grab practice axes, dulled thankfully, and perform a traditional stepping dance around the couple. It's part choreography, part chaos. Think river dance meets a lumberjack convention. Every twist and stomp is meant to mimic battle stances, forging motions or wood-cutting swings. You try to stay out of the way. Mostly succeed. Historians don't all agree this dance ever existed. Some say it was invented for 20th century folk festivals. Others argue that references to blade dances in old sagas point to something very real, especially during community feasts or solstice ceremonies. Either way, it's energetic, slightly dangerous, and really fun to watch. The couple eventually retrieves their axes from the post and walks home with them, sheathed and tied with a red thread. That thread will stay on for 9 nights, symbolising the 9 worlds of Norse cosmology and the idea that their union echoes through each one. You follow at a respectful distance, the hum of laughter and music still echoing from the square. Today's ceremony was less mystical than yesterday's, more grounded, but no less powerful. There's something unmistakably intimate about handing someone a weapon and saying, "Here. Protect what we are." In a world of raids and winter wolves, maybe that's the most romantic thing you could ever do. The sky glows orange as dusk settles over the village, and just when you think the ceremonies must be winding down, a sharp horn blares from the cliff's edge. People immediately perk up, like a reflex. Children stop squabbling. Dogs hush. Something big is about to begin. The naming of the hearth, one of the most emotionally charged parts of a Viking marriage. You might expect a naming ceremony to involve a child. Not here. In these villages, what gets named is the first fire lit in the couple's home. It's called Eldrenavn, or fire name, and it is believed to carry the soul of the household. The hearth isn't just for cooking. It's an anchor, a spiritual witness, a silent keeper of secrets and arguments and late-night stories. Basically the Viking version of a therapy couch, but hotter and more flammable. The couple stands outside their new dwelling, which was built with the help of both families and the village. A longhouse of modest size with thick turf walls and a shingled roof that slopes low like a heavy brow. There's a wooden plaque above the door, still blank, waiting for the fire name to be carved. They step inside together for the first time as a married pair. Everyone follows, but not into the house, just to the threshold. No shoes may cross it until the fire is named. Inside, it's dark and cool, and in the centre of the floor is a ring of stones around a pile of carefully stacked kindling. Birch bark, small branches, and one large pine log painted with runes. No one speaks. Then the elder Kona, or firewoman, steps forward. She's an elder, always a woman, who has performed this rite more times than you can count. She carries a small bowl of embers from the main village hearth, the communal fire that's burned continuously for years. Some say it's never gone out. Others roll their eyes and point out that even Viking myths needed kindling. She enters alone, places the embers on the edge of the kindling pile, then calls the couple forward. Together the bride and groom kneel, breath close to the bowl, and blow gently until the embers catch the birch bark. Smoke rises, then flame, then warmth, a flicker that becomes a roar. They've done it. The first fire lives. Now comes the curious part. The firewoman turns to the groom. He must name the flame. This isn't like naming a puppy. It's not cute. It's a declaration of intent, legacy, and cosmic alignment. The name should reflect their hopes for the home, their combined spirits, or an ancestral tie. The groom hesitates. Who wouldn't? Then he speaks a word you don't recognise. Something old, from a dialect barely spoken now, but it makes the elder nod. The bride smiles. A few of the villagers sigh like they've just heard a poem end. Someone steps forward with a chisel and begins carving the name above the door. You squint. It looks like Veldotter, daughter of warmth. Poetic and powerful. It's a reminder. This fire is female. Like all household flames in Norse lore, connected to the goddess Frigg and the protective spirits of the home. Historians generally agree that hearths were central to Viking life, but there's less consensus about whether naming them was common or ceremonial. Some scholars believe this tradition came from Sami influence or older Proto-Norse shamanic customs. Others argue it was more of a private habit, done silently perhaps, and without this level of pageantry. Regardless, it's very real in this village. Next, a pot of stew is hung above the flame, not for eating yet. The food must absorb the first fire before it can nourish the couple. Instead, the bride adds herbs from her family's garden, parsley, thyme, lovage, and the groom adds salt he harvested himself from the nearby shore. Their contributions blend over the flame as the aroma fills the small home. Here's the quirky part. A family cat is then brought in. Yes, a literal feline. She's placed by the hearth and allowed to curl up beside it. If she settles quickly and falls asleep, it's a good sign. If she paces or leaves the house, it's believed the fire disapproves. Or worse, that the house harbours a restless spirit. No pressure, little kitty. Tonight, the cat yawns, stretches, and curls up like a cinnamon roll beside the pine log. Crisis averted. As the stew simmers, the couple sits silently, watching the flames dance. Outside, the villagers hum a low tune. Not a song exactly, but a wordless tone that vibrates in your bones. It's soothing, like thunder in the distance or a mother rocking a cradle. Then, the final touch. Each person in the crowd steps forward and drops something small into the fire's edge. A twig, a nut, a ribbon. These are symbolic offerings, prayers, blessings, or memories. One woman drops a lock of her own hair. A child adds a carved button. Even the firewoman places a stone, smooth and round, into the circle. You're handed a piece of driftwood and invited to do the same. You hesitate. What do you wish for this couple? For yourself. You drop the wood. It flares briefly, then disappears, and with that the fire is officially accepted. The door is closed, the crowd disperses. Tomorrow the name carved above the door will be oiled with seal fat and soot to preserve it. The stew will be eaten. The cat will probably steal a bit of meat. But for tonight, the couple sleeps beside the fire, wrapped in its promise. You leave quietly, the scent of smoke clinging to your tunic. This moment, quiet and glowing, feels less like a ritual and more like a benediction. The marriage has been forged not just with oaths and laughter and axe blades, but with something ancient, primal, and still warm beneath your skin. Because in the cold dark of the north, what you call a home isn't where your bed is. It's wherever the fire knows your name. You wake to frost threading the window panes and the distant sound of someone singing to sheep. The newlyweds are long gone from view, probably out gathering driftwood or trying not to burn breakfast over their still smouldering hearth. But you've barely tied your boots before someone grabs your arm and grins. You're coming to the rod gift today. You're intrigued. The rod gift, literally advice-giving, isn't what you expect. This isn't a post-wedding hangover brunch or a nosy aunt cornering the couple with how to make a marriage last tips. No, this is a full-blown, semi-sarcastic, wildly theatrical, public marriage advice ritual, and it's one of the most hilariously uncomfortable things you've ever seen. The setting? A ring of stones in the centre of the village, which now serves as a kind of pop-up theatre in the round. The couple sits on a low bench in the middle, like contestants on a quiz show, and around them gather villagers of all ages. Elders carry staffs, children hold painted signs, and someone even has a goat wearing a ribbon. Apparently he always shows up. No one's sure who owns him anymore. It begins with a dramatic clearing of the throat. The first advisor steps forward. It's the village healer, a wiry woman with a lazy eye and a voice like a whetstone. She lifts her hand and proclaims, "First advice. Never let love spoil your beer. Share the brewing and the drinking." Everyone laughs, including the couple. Next comes a sequence of advisors, some solemn, others grinning like jesters. Each steps forward, offers a single sentence of wisdom, and then taps the couple on the head with a ceremonial spoon carved from rowanwood. Why a spoon? Because as one old man chuckles, if they don't listen, you hit them with the blunt end of tradition. One popular line, "Argue near the cows so someone benefits from the manure." Another, "If he snores, braid his beard to the bedpost. He'll wake politely." It's hard to tell where advice ends and roast begins. There's rhythm to it, though. 3 serious tips follow every 2 jokes. Like this gem, let no night pass with anger between you. Let no morning rise with cold feet in the bed. That one earns a murmur of agreement. What's fascinating is how deeply tied this event is to Viking ideas of social cohesion. A marriage isn't a private deal, it's a public contract, and the community feels not just entitled, but obligated to help it succeed. This ritual turns that responsibility into a performance. Funny? Yes. but also heartfelt. It creates a sense of shared guardianship over the couple's happiness. Historians still argue whether this custom was widespread or unique to coastal settlements like this one. Some point to fragments in the Havamal, the Norse Book of Wisdom, that suggest advice rituals may have existed in various forms. Others believe it may have originated from local theatre traditions adapted into marriage rites over time. Either way, it clearly serves a social function. You're not just watching a wedding after party, you're seeing trust redistributed, obligation woven back into the fabric of village life. Now for the twist. Once the public has said their piece, it's time for the counter-advising. The newlyweds stand, brush off their cloaks, and deliver 3 bits of advice to the crowd. That's right, the tables turn. The bride steps forward first. If you can't fix your roof alone, don't gossip about mine. Applause. A cheeky teenage boy whispers, "She's watching you, Uncle Tormod." The groom follows. "Before you mock my love, show me yours still lights a fire." Now there are some actual whoops. The final word comes together. They clasp hands, lift them high, and declare, "We accept your advice, your humour, your burdens. May our home shelter your wisdom, and your jokes too." Cue the goat bleating in approval. Perfect timing. From a cultural standpoint, this shared ritual advice isn't just ceremonial, it's psychologically savvy. Modern anthropologists point out that by embedding marriage in a social web of humour, memory and communal input, couples are more likely to stay committed. You're not just disappointing a spouse if you give up, you're disappointing everyone who braided you into the story. Now, of course, not every bit of advice is universally appreciated. You overhear 2 young wives grumble about a particularly conservative elder who always warns women to obey their husband's logic. This year, one of them responded by handing him a scroll titled A Beginner's Guide to Listening. It now hangs from his staff like a victory banner. As the ritual winds down, a final tradition plays out, the sharing loaf. A large round bread, marked with the rune for unity, is broken into dozens of pieces. Everyone takes one, symbolising the couple's willingness to feed the village and the village's role in sustaining them. It's warm, full of herbs and crusted with salt. No one declines, and tucked inside one slice, a single bronze coin. Whoever gets it is considered the luck bringer, a sign they'll be next to marry. A burst of laughter erupts when it ends up with a stoic fisherman who hasn't dated in 20 years. "Guess I better learn how to bake," he mutters, deadpan. Someone throws a flower at him. That night there's no feast, no dance, just a quiet glow as candles are lit in windows across the village. You walk past homes where newlyweds from years ago now sit side by side mending nets or telling bedtime stories. The kind of marriages forged not just with romance but with shared laughter, mutual embarrassment and a heavy loaf of bread. You think back to the couple from today, now alone in their fire-named home, probably still chuckling over a joke about bedpost braids. They've been given all the advice anyone could possibly need. But even more than that, they've been seen, mocked a little, cherished a lot, and folded gently into the fabric of something much bigger than 2 people. In Viking villages, marriage isn't a promise whispered between lovers. It's a loud, messy, spoon-wielding commitment witnessed by everyone, and somehow that makes it stronger. The wind rattles the thatch rooftops the next morning, and you find yourself blinking into a sky just beginning to shift from steel grey to pale blue. The wedding's behind you, yet the village hums with the kind of tension that says, something's still coming. People are gathering, not around the hearth this time, but up on the cliffs, where the sea throws itself against the stone with dramatic flair. What now? Oh, only the trial of kin promise. No big deal, just a ritualised gauntlet where both families must prove their loyalty to the marriage through absurd, often hilarious challenges. You're not sure whether to bring a shield or a snack. The idea behind this tradition is old, that a marriage isn't just the binding of 2 individuals, but the merging of 2 kin groups. And as with anything involving Viking families, there's tension, rivalry, and at least one cousin who insists on arm wrestling every time mead is nearby. As you arrive, the staging area looks like a cross between a festival and a sports arena. 2 large flags flap in the wind, one for each family. Under each flag, the kin gather, wearing tokens in their family colours, dyed wool bands, carved brooches. One woman even wears a helmet with antlers. No one questions it. It's a look. An elder from a neutral family, called the Binderdoma, or tie judge, steps between them with a staff topped by interlocking rings. This is your referee. His job? Ensure that every challenge is met with honour, laughter and minimum fatalities. Mostly. The ceremony kicks off with a race. But not just any race. A 3-legged potato and runes sack race. Picture it. One family member ties their leg to another's. They each hold a small rune-marked sack, and the goal is to reach the sea and return with a fish. Why a fish? Because catching one together proves coordination and also provides dinner. Logic. Viking style. As people stumble and flail and scream about kelp in their tunics, the crowd cheers. You lose track of how many times someone falls into the surf, but one duo from the bride's side returns triumphantly holding a flapping cod. Their flag is raised one notch higher. Then comes the tail duel. This is not about strength, it's about wit. Each family selects their best storyteller. They stand before the crowd, alternating lines in a fabricated saga about the couple. The trick: the story must escalate in absurdity, rhyme loosely, and stay under a time limit. From the groom's side, he tamed a bear with just his sock and wed her under stars that talk. From the bride's, she brewed a storm inside her cup and made the Jarl's beard curl right up. This continues until someone stumbles or cracks up laughing. A draw is called. The village is thrilled. Next, the strength of bond test. This one is physical. Each family must lift and carry a log inscribed with both family crests across a short, muddy track. But there's a twist. The log is coated in slippery animal fat. Yep, nothing says kinship like holding onto a greasy symbol of unity. The bride's younger brothers nearly topple, but recover thanks to a cousin's epic belly slide assist. The groom's uncle takes a dramatic tumble that will be gossiped about for years, especially since he claimed he once carried a warship's mast alone. Must have been less greasy, someone snorts. Historians debate the origin of these trials. Some believe they evolved from pre-Christian harvest games. Others argue they're parodies of more serious oath-swearing rites. Whatever the truth, the blend of challenge and comedy reinforces something crucial: that tension between families must be aired, but also gently deflated. Conflict in Viking tradition is acknowledged, then transformed into bonding. Now comes the kin oath, the most solemn moment yet. Both families line up, facing each other. The couple stands between them, hands clasped. Each person steps forward and places a hand on the joined hands of the couple, one by one. And with each touch, they speak a sentence. I will not speak ill of your name. I will not withhold bread from your fire. I will not raise blade or rumour against your bond. Even those with long-standing grudges must comply, or leave the field. Refusal to speak these oaths marks you as unwilling to support the marriage. It's rare, but not unheard of. Today, though, everyone steps forward, even the aunt who spent all of yesterday critiquing the stew. The air feels heavier now, like something ancient is watching. Even the gulls quiet down. Finally, both families shout a phrase in unison: 2 bloods, 1 hearth. A wild applause follows. The couple is doused, literally, in seawater by playful cousins, because nothing says, your families now get along like a freezing saltwater baptism. There's one last touch. The tie judge presents a carved wooden knot, an interwoven symbol that's part decorative art, part legal badge. The couple receives it, and it will hang in their home. Not just a pretty trinket, but a reminder. You're not just married to each other. You're bound to all these people, with all their quirks, love, and very slippery logs. By sunset, the families begin walking back to the village together, more tightly knit than they were this morning. You overhear one elderly woman whisper, I never liked his sister, but her fish toss technique was impressive. Growth. You trail behind, the scent of salt and bonfire on the air, and wonder how many modern weddings would benefit from something like this. Less pomp, more participation. Less seating chart stress, more greasy log races. Real bonds proven by real effort among real humans. Because in Viking villages, family doesn't fade into the background after the vows. It charges in, feet tied together, clutching fish and forgiveness and freshly bruised pride. You wake to a strange calm. For the first time since the wedding began, the village doesn't smell like roasting meat or buzzing mead. No drums, no shouting, no goats wearing flower crowns. Just the soft clack of looms, the creak of ox carts, and quiet conversation over steaming bowls of porridge. It's a transitional kind of quiet, the day when celebration fades into the work of real life. But today's not just about sobering up or sweeping up. It's time for the hearth blessing, a quiet but meaningful ritual that plants the couple's new life deep into the soil of home and hearth. You follow the winding path through the village until you reach the newlyweds' house. It's not just a building now, it's a hearthstead, officially recognised by the community. And you're not the only one arriving. Neighbours show up with small bundles, herbs, carved talismans, coiled ropes of dried garlic, a still smoking coal from their own hearth. The couple greets each guest at the threshold, receiving each item with bowed heads and gentle words. It feels less like a gift exchange and more like a sacred passing of torches. The first act of the ritual is the kindling walk. The couple, hand in hand, circles their home 3 times, a coal cradled between them in a small fire-safe dish carved from stone. The coal symbolises continuity, fire from fire, warmth carried forward from the wider community into their own flame. At each corner they stop and recite short lines like, "May no cold conquer us, may flame answer need, may quarrel cool before embers fade." The neighbours murmur along, and even the children fall quiet. The third time around they enter their home, and the guests follow. Inside, the hearth is cold but prepared, stacked with wood, tucked with the herbs, and dusted with a fine layer of ashes, carried from the groom's family hearth, signifying lineage. The bride places the coal onto the wood, a slow crackle, then a whoosh. Fire takes, and the house exhales, as if it's finally alive. A mainstay of Norse belief is that the hearth isn't just a source of heat, it's a spiritual centre. Some traditions believe a vatir, or household spirit, resides in or near the fire, watching over the family. Feeding the hearth properly, treating it with respect, even speaking to it during storms, these are marks of a family that honours its foundation. Historians still argue whether these hearth blessings were codified rituals or organically evolved practices that varied by region. Some sagas mention elaborate songs, while others simply describe quiet, private moments of firelighting and whispered hopes. What's certain is that a lit hearth marked the true start of married life. A wedding was a ceremony, but the hearth was a covenant. As the fire grows, guests begin to place their offerings around the room. Some are practical: a jug of honey, a sheaf of linen, a knife carved with protective runes. Others are more esoteric: a stone said to ward off trolls, a feather from a hawk known to mate for life, and, this is real, a tiny wooden spoon labelled for arguments. You guess it's a throwback to the advice ritual, and everyone chuckles when it's displayed. Now, it's time for the 4-spoon blessing. 4 elders step forward, each carrying a carved wooden spoon, each one symbolising an element: earth, fire, water, air. They approach the couple one by one. Earth: let your home be rooted, strong in storms, steady in drought. Fire: let your love burn clean, feed your warmth, light your path. Water: let your words flow, smooth quarrels, soften loss. Air: let your dreams lift, your minds meet, your laughter echo. They hold the spoons over the hearth flame, then tap the couple on the shoulder with the handles. A soft ritual, gentle, symbolic. You get the sense it's less about spectacle and more about soul. There's a moment of collective pause after this. People don't rush off, they linger. A few find corners to chat quietly, others hand wash a couple of bowls, and children crawl under the benches playing some complicated game involving a goat figurine and pretend raids. The final act of the hearth blessing? The stew of binding. It's humble. A single pot hung over the new fire, simmering with contributions from all households. Root vegetables, smoked meat, dried herbs, a chunk of barley loaf dissolved into the broth. Each guest ladles a portion into a handmade clay bowl, then returns their spoon, symbolically empty, to a shared basket. The couple eats last, sipping directly from the ladle. "You feed from what we give," one woman says. "Tomorrow you'll feed others." And that's it. There's no fanfare. People trickle out. A few neighbours leave behind tiny carved tokens tucked into corners or windowsills. Good luck charms. One is shaped like a hedgehog, another like a spiral, another has no obvious shape at all. "It's a riddle," the carver says with a wink, "as your marriage will solve it." As the house empties, you see the couple alone by the hearth, fire flickering softly. The groom leans into the bride and says something you don't catch. She laughs. quiet and warm, and they settle down, shoulder to shoulder. In a world as harsh as a Viking winter, where lives could be short and comforts rare, a hearth was more than a fireplace. It was survival, story, sanctuary. To bless it was to promise more than love. It was to promise presence, in silence, in soup, in shared embers that ward off the dark. You step outside into the chill, but you feel warmer than before. By now you've seen the whirlwind of Viking courtship, the chaos of ceremonies, the fish-flinging of kin trials, and the calm of the hearth blessing. But if you thought that was the end of Viking marital rituals, nope. There's still one curious twist left, one that takes place well after the wedding and its fiery stew. It's called the season of separation. You hear whispers about it as you linger in the village. Old women clucking over loom work mention it. A blacksmith's apprentice talks about it like it's both punishment and rite of passage. And when you finally ask, a farmer shrugs and says, that's just how they test the roots. Here's how it works. After the wedding and the hearth blessing, the newlywed couple is sent apart. Yes, separated, for a full cycle of the moon, sometimes longer. Not as punishment, not because of cold feet, but because of an old belief. A union only matters if it misses, aches, and realigns. You watch the couple pack up modest travel bundles, eyes darting with hesitation and curiosity. The bride heads east with her mother's sister, bound for a shepherding camp near the forest edge. The groom joins a fishing expedition out at sea. They won't see each other, won't communicate, and certainly won't share a bed. It's a marriage test by distance, and it starts immediately. The logic? Simple. If marriage is built only on ceremony and proximity, it will crumble when the wind shifts. But if it deepens through absence, through the ache of wanting, then it's worth anchoring for life. During the season of separation, both partners take part in gendered and ancestral duties. The bride spends her days learning preservation techniques, drying herbs, rendering animal fat for tallow, smoking meats, weaving winter cloaks. It's less about chores and more about symbolic preparation, learning how to keep things, relationships included. The groom, meanwhile, wakes before dawn on a creaking boat, tossing nets and braving sleet. His lessons aren't just about catching fish. They're about staying calm during storms, watching the horizon, recognizing the patterns of tide and time, essentially how to navigate when things get rough. Sound familiar? Historians still argue whether this separation was a widespread custom or limited to certain coastal regions. Some argue it evolved from seasonal labour patterns rather than ritual design. Others suggest it mirrors broader Norse beliefs in trials of worth, like Odin's solitary hanging on the world tree to gain wisdom. Whatever the route, the impact is clear. Absence carves space for appreciation, and longing becomes a kind of vow. While apart, the couple is watched, not creepily, but culturally. Elders observe how they speak of each other. Do they boast? Do they pine? Do they complain? There's even a fringe practice in which elders interpret signs from nature. A cracked egg yolk may mean discord. A perfectly bloomed thistle may signal harmony. Take that with a pinch of sea salt. There are also small secret exchanges allowed depending on the family's customs. A carved stone left on a trail, a length of ribbon tied to a tree. One couple, it's said, left each other braided tokens made from their own hair, hidden in plain sight inside baskets of wool. That's either deeply romantic or deeply itchy. Toward the end of the month, anticipation builds. The village watches the horizon, both sea and land, for signs of return. Some say this waiting is its own right. You watch the bride one evening standing near the cliff's edge, shawl tight around her shoulders, looking out where the sea chews at the sky. She doesn't say a word, she doesn't have to. When the groom's ship finally returns, there's no parade, no feast, just a quiet, sacred moment at dusk. The couple meets again at the waystone, a large stone carved with rings and knots, placed where all paths cross at the village's edge. It's the same place where war parties once left and returned. Now it holds different echoes. They step toward each other in silence, each holding a small item from their time apart. Sometimes it's something made, sometimes something found. This is the token exchange, and its meaning runs deep. Here is what I carried when I carried you. The bride offers a woven bracelet scented with sage and smoke. The groom gives a stone etched with wave patterns, smoothed by sea. They don't kiss. They don't speak. Instead, they sit on the stone for a while, just breathing in the same air again, feeling how different it is to be close after distance. That evening they return to their hearth, this time together. The fire is still burning, kept alive in their absence by a chosen guardian, often a younger sibling or village elder. If the flame went out, it would be a bad omen. But tonight, it's strong, alive, waiting. And now comes the part that's almost too poetic to believe, the rekindling meal. Unlike the stew of the hearth blessing, this one is simple. Just bread, butter, and a hot drink brewed from herbs collected during the separation. The couple prepares it themselves, alone, and as they eat, they speak a promise, not aloud but with small shared gestures, a touch, a glance, a tear. You watch from a respectful distance, firelight flickering across their faces. They're changed, not in grand ways, but in quiet depth, like river stones smoothed by weather. Their marriage is no longer new, it's seasoned, not perfect, but real. Some cultures begin marriage with a honeymoon. The Vikings, it seems, begin with a proving ground. They say love is strongest when it bends without breaking. And this was the bending. It's late now. The moon climbs high and paints the village in silver. You feel it in your bones, that slow settle of something complete. But before you drift too far, there's one last piece of this Viking marital puzzle. A ceremony that isn't marked on any carved stone or rune-inscribed pillar, yet lives on in the whispered traditions of the old ones. This is the night of retelling. It's not for show. No music, no feast. Just a quiet gathering of family elders and, most crucially, the bride and groom, seated not side by side, but facing each other across the fire. The premise is simple. The couple must recount in their own words the full story of their courtship, betrothal, wedding, separation, and reunion, each from their own perspective. No interruptions, no corrections, just listening. Then, once both have spoken, they're invited to correct the story, gently, humorously, respectfully, before co-authoring a final retelling together. This merged version becomes their official oral history, their marriage saga. Tonight you're invited to witness one. The bride begins. Her voice is low, a little hesitant but steady. She starts with the day she first noticed the groom, chasing an escaped chicken through the flax fields, tripping over his own boots. Laughter bubbles around the fire. She recounts the awkward offer of courtship, the way his hands trembled as he presented her with that little carved whale tooth. She tells of the kin trials, her mother's anxiety, and how she nearly backed out twice. Then the groom speaks. He talks about carving that tooth all night by moonlight, slicing his thumb more times than he can count. He remembers the overwhelming noise of the wedding, the terrible cheese someone gifted them, and the long nights out at sea thinking only of her shawl fluttering in the wind. Each retelling is layered with detail, some fact, some emotion, some mischievous revisionism. "I did help catch the sheep," he insists. "You scared it into the stew pot," she replies. But as they combine their tales into one shared version, you feel it click into place. Not a perfect narrative, but a braided one. Two voices woven into one enduring thread. This shared memory becomes their first joint act of storytelling, and in Norse culture that matters a lot. You see, Vikings didn't just value war and weathered ships, they worshipped story. Oral tradition was sacred. To be remembered was to remain alive in the echoes of future hearthfires. A married couple who couldn't remember together, who couldn't laugh at what didn't go to plan, was seen as unmoored, unanchored. Historians still argue whether this night of retelling existed as a formalized ritual or grew informally from familial customs. Some sagas contain hints, mentions of shared tongues or braided truths, while others remain silent. Yet the concept persists among reenactors and folklorists. It resonates, doesn't it? The idea that the first thing you build as a married couple is a memory you can agree on. Once the story is told, it's given an ending phrase, often improvised. Tonight the couple chooses, "So our fire was lit and the goat survived." The audience erupts in soft chuckles. The goat from the Chaos Circle has clearly earned its place in legend. Then the couple takes turns blowing out the candles around the space one by one. It's a symbolic dimming, a turning inward, a quiet that says, "It's just us now." But before the room fades to dark, a final act remains, the legacy braid. From a basket passed around the circle, each family member offers a ribbon, short, colourful, marked with runes, thread, or tiny charms. These represent blessings, memories, warnings, or jokes. One says, "Patience is a stew," another bears a silver thimble. The bride and groom weave these into a thick cord, taking turns not speaking, their hands moving in slow rhythm. Once complete, the braid is tied to the house beam above their bed, or, if they're travelling folk, worn inside a pouch for protection. It isn't just decoration. It's the physical embodiment of shared story, family guidance, and the humour needed to survive another year without strangling each other over who forgot to salt the fish. And now, as the village retires, the final hush settles in. You stand beneath the starlit sky, the last sounds fading, the low bleat of a sleepy goat, the rustle of that thistle bush, the occasional clink of a spoon being washed. You realise you've witnessed something rare, not just a wedding, but a weaving of people, place, time, and tenderness. And you wonder, what stories will be told of your hearth? What ribbon would your friends toss into your legacy braid? Now, let's slow it all down together. The air is still now. No laughter, no chanting, just the soft hush of fire, dying to embers and wind brushing gently past timber beams. You sit with that warmth still glowing somewhere behind your ribs, flickering with the memory of stories spun around firelight and futures braided with care. The night presses close, but it's not cold. It wraps around you like a woolen cloak, one passed down through many hands. Grandmothers who laughed into bowls of stew, uncles who stumbled through toasts, cousins who carved tokens by moonlight. You imagine the soft creak of the longhouse, the muted murmur of couples finding each other again after time apart. 1,000 tiny moments stacked like wood for the hearth. The candles gutter low. Somewhere, a nightbird sings. A single clear note, then quiet again. The stars blink patiently above, watching, like they always have. You're safe here. You've wandered through the strange customs, danced awkwardly at the edges of old ceremonies, flinched at fermented fish, and still made it through. You've seen love in forms raw, rugged, and oddly tender, and you've carried it all back to this quiet moment. So breathe deep. Let the flicker of the past melt into the calm of the now. Let your limbs soften, your jaw slacken, your thoughts slow to the gentle rhythm of stories gently fading. Tomorrow will come, as it always does, but for now, you've earned your rest.